Linda Johnson Rice, you are charged with interviewing Bob Johnson. You're not used to being on that side of the interview. You're used to being interviewed, aren't you?
Nothing could please me more than to be able to do this and to be here with WVON and their whole day-long financial seminar, because I think it's so important now that we as African Americans really understand and take hold of our financial situations, no matter how difficult they are. So for us to hear from Bob Johnson and hear what he has to say, to impart his wisdom and his success story is really terrific.
What type of advice would you give? We have business people here, African American business people here, and they've spent a majority of the day dealing with financial issues and financial situations. What type of advice would you give them to build their businesses and to building partnerships?
Yeah. I think the first thing that you can do is it starts with yourself. You have to believe in yourself. Yeah. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe that you can overcome obstacles, if you don't believe you have the work ethic, if you don't believe you have the inner confidence to project to other people, it'll never happen. Because part of starting a business is not only having the vision of an idea, you've got to build around you a team of stakeholders who believe in you. People follow leaders. People invest in leaders. People support people who have a vision and are willing to and are able to articulate it, and not just the ability to, a lot of people got a good gift for gab. It's the ability to convince people that you're going to be part of something that's going to be successful. You're going to share in the success. It's going to be beneficial to you and your family in the long run. You're going to be respected for what you contribute, and you're going to have an opportunity to fulfill your own dreams consistent with the dreams of the person you're working with. If you can convey that sense of confidence and that sense of leadership and focus on giving people an opportunity to grow and be successful with you, you're going to have people, and I mean really smart people, coming to be a part of what you do. And that's what I've always done at BET. Every time when I started BET, the one thing I wanted to do and the one thing I did was to make sure that everybody at BET who got in on the ground floor with me rode the elevator up.
Right.
And we created more multimillionaires at BET than any company ever created in this country. And that's because we believe that if you come work with us, you get to share in every opportunity that the people at the top share. And that's to me is the focus of how do you get people to follow you.
Right.
They got to believe in you and believe that they're going to benefit as you do.
Well, right. I think people inherently have to know that there's something, some benefit for them as well. And so, no, I completely understand that, and I completely agree with that. And you've built an incredible business, built BET, and then you build it, and then you sell it.
Yeah, because I have
That wasn't a question yet.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, yes.
No, it's been a question all my life. Why'd you sell BET? And the reason is, and this is something that, that I have as a philosophy that's somewhat different, and it's just like your business. Your business is a family business, and it's a business that remains minority controlled, and it serves that purpose well. When I looked at BET, I saw BET as a business that I was creating to maximize shareholder value for all the shareholders who were a part of it. And so back earlier, I started with John Malone. He was a shareholder. He, at some point, deserved the right to exit BET. I couldn't attach him to the company and have him stay around as long as my kids, until they grew up, until they were going to take it, assuming they knew how to run it. And so I had an obligation to all shareholders. I took BET public in '91, and we became the first company publicly traded on New York Stock Exchange. So my philosophy was not so much ownership for ownership, but ownership to maximize the return to the investors. And I felt that as long as BET had an editorial brand that we had established, anybody who acquired BET would be crazy to change the brand focus and the brand ideology of BET.
Otherwise, what's the point of
Otherwise,
acquiring
what's the point of buying?
Right.
And so for me, it worked out well that by selling it to Viacom, which had a history of brands, they had VH1, MTV, and Paramount, CBS, and so on, that the brand, and then having the ability, because I was selling it under my term, to designate who was going to continue to run it, in this case, Deborah Lee,
Yes.
who is now the CEO.
She's doing a great job.
That I was certain that the legacy of BET that we had started would continue and indeed expand, is what she's done. And so to me, selling it to maximize shareholder return for John Malone and the others, selling it to maximize the opportunity for some of the people who were in the startup group to be able to take money out, and at the same time ensure that BET was going to be handed off from a legacy standpoint into good hands who kept the editorial focus intact. It worked. Now, and so some companies you can do that with, some companies you can't do that with. But for me, that was a good rationale for selling it, and it was the right time to sell it with the right kind of economic return.
Right, and I understand that, and it makes perfect sense because, as we were saying earlier before we sat down, is that no matter what, BET will always be known fundamentally as the company that Bob Johnson started. And that's the most important thing.
That sounds like a good tombstone marker.
But so it's very interesting because, you know, my father started his business, you know, 1942, and he had a very different philosophy, and this is just a conversation I'm having now because, you know, he really believed in tight control and complete ownership, and you know there weren't any partners. That way didn't work for him. But now, as I see going forward, as our business has moved and progressed, and we've had our challenges, but now we're on the upswing, and I do want to introduce Desiree Rogers, who is here, who is our CEO. But you know, we have investors now. We have Chase, J.P. Morgan Chase, that's invested in the company. So it is a different mindset. And I think that as you progress and things move and change, and you have to make some very tough decisions, but it's all about building the business. It really is about building the business and really understanding the legacy and keeping that legacy intact.
Linda, I think you're absolutely right, because for all of you out there, is one of the key components of growing a business is getting the necessary capital to grow. So if you start off where you own 100%, but you need more capital to grow the business, you may have to sell off 20%, 30%, depending on how you look at the business needs. Don't fear that. Don't be afraid about the notion that you might fall below 51% and therefore not be minority owned, because being minority owned is the culture you set, is the focus you set, it's the service you make to serve the minority community, and it's your commitment to do what you can do best within the minority community. Keep in mind, if you go back to J.P. Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon probably owns less than 0.05% of Chase.
Right, he's the CEO.
He's the CEO, but no one will ever question whether or not he's in charge of Chase. But he's brought in capital as a publicly traded company to grow that business. So whether you get money from outside investors or whether you get money from friends or family, don't be afraid to take on capital, sell shares or restructure debt or trade preferred or common, whatever it is, because the notion is you want to be in charge of a growth company, if that's what you want to be, a company that can go to scale, a company that compete, and you need capital to grow. So if you want to stay above 51%, by all means, if you can do it and don't sell your equity off, do it. But if you have to, because you got a great strategic partner that could bring something to the table and they want to be an equity player, and you end up with 50 or less than 50, you're still the CEO, you're still setting the vision for the company, you are achieving what you set out to do. And I think that's very important to understand, because we can't get to scale without growth capital.
Absolutely, absolutely. Words of wisdom spoken, well spoken. So if we move along your timeline here, so we've sold BET and now you have the RLJ companies. So tell us a little bit about what RLJ is, what its mission, what are some of the companies, what are the holdings that you have under that?
You know, once I sold BET, and we sold BET at the highest of the multiple market for a media company, so The question is now, what do you do? And if you exit a business, which is something that everybody should think of, and no one should think they're going to run a business forever, and at some point you decide you're going to sell it, or at some point you're not around, and somebody else is going to take it over. So you got to think about that. But with BET, when I sold it, I clearly made a notion that I was not going to just sit around and not do anything. We had capital, and we had access to talented people based on BET success. People wanted to work with me. And so I sort of divided it into sort of three kinds of philosophies. One is I was going to sort of look at businesses that were underpenetrated by minority Americans, and to me that looked at financial assets. The second was I was going to look at strategic opportunities with partners and friends that I knew, because I could bring capital or other things to a deal. And the third thing was I was going to sort of look at areas where I could sort of be first into the space and sort of take advantage of being first. And that's sort of what I did. So we got into financial asset management because it's relatively underpenetrated, and we had credibility in the marketplace for having created value with BET. We figured we could sell that. So we started a private equity fund in hotel real estate. We ran that fund, raised about a little under $3 billion in that fund, brought in a young man to work with me from Hilton. I was on the board at the time. We ran that business for 12 years, and just this past May, I think it was, we took the company public, and now we've got a publicly traded hotel REIT on Wall Street. It's under, believe it or not, the ticker name RLJ Trust. And it's 140 hotels, 20,000 rooms, including the Courtyard Marriott right down here, and probably every hotel around Midway Airport's a Courtyard. We own that one. And those. And so that's what we did in financial. We started a private equity fund in partnership with the Carlyle Group. We got involved with Western Assets in managing money for the federal government in what they call the PPIP program, which is a partnership between the government and private investors to buy up mortgage-backed securities so banks have more money to lend. So we really, and then the second thing we did, we looked at a market, and this is the one I'm really excited about, and what I think the gentleman was referring to about closing the wealth gap. One of the biggest drainers of wealth from African Americans is spending their money paying interest for payday loans. We spend, now we collectively, but minorities and others, but principally African American, anywhere from $4 to $6 billion borrowing money for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Right.
That is absolutely crazy. And we're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 to 360 annual percentage rate to borrow your own money. I am convinced that we can come up with a lending strategy for emergency and short-term borrowing, because everybody has an emergency. Something happens, the refrigerator goes out, and you got to get the food is going to spoil if you don't get a new refrigerator, get one fixed. Somebody's going to get in trouble, and you got to help them out. Somebody get, medical emergency, funeral, whatever it is. You may need $1,000, $750, $500. But to pay $360 for 2 weeks, and in some cases less than a week, because you pay at the end of your pay period. So we are committed to finding a solution to providing lower cost borrowing, first and foremost, financial literacy as a component of the borrowing, which is a requirement of it, and we are looking to lower your interest rates if you pass the test, which will. A way to end chronic borrowing, because one of the worst things that happen is you get on the treadmill of borrowing. So heavy emphasis and focus on savings. We believe that if we could reduce the amount of money that African Americans spend at payday lenders, it's like putting that money back in your pocket.
Yes. And how, that's great. But let me follow up with that, because, and how are you letting people know about this? How would they be able to access your knowledge or your company's knowledge in this area? Because I think that's critical, because you can only be so many places, so many times. So how do you get this out?
We are going to have this business out. We're working on it now. We hope to launch sometime September, October. with this business, and we will do the normal things that people do. We'll do it. We'll advertise in magazines. We'll advertise on Tom Joyner. We'll advertise on BET.
Right.
We'll be on the internet. We will let people. VON is the first place we're going to buy. So we will do that to let people know about it, to make sure that people understand it, because it is really a shame that we spend. I mean, everybody, like I said, it's not a shame to need short-term borrowing. It's a shame to pay that much for it. That's the thing. So that's what we're going to do, and we're very excited about that, and we want to see it grow and become a major business, but also a major service. That's what we like to call that.
I agree. I think that's critical. I know our August issue of Ebony was about black wealth, and dedicated really to sort of wealth creation. And the statistics for African Americans have been not so great over the past 30 years. So, and I think in some ways you've challenged, America to sort of deal with this disparity on this economic playing field. So this is sort of one of the ways that you're doing that. Are there others?
There's another thing that we're doing, which is, and I'll talk about the philosophy of this whole issue, and it's something that there needs to be a dialogue within the black community, and indeed the white community.
And we actually are going to circle back to what your other companies are.
Right. But here's the thing. We're launching another business. It's called Ops Place. Ops Place is basically, we're going to aggregate African Americans who are looking for employment in the public and private sector of this whole U.S. economy on the internet. And we're also going to aggregate minority vendors who are looking to do business with major corporations and entities throughout this thing. Because the internet is going to be the principal way people sort of interact and communicate for opportunities. You see it with LinkedIn, you see it with Monsters, you see it with the Ladders, and so on. So we want to do the very same thing. And we're not going to charge the consumers for going on the site. It's a very sophisticated site. We got a great technology partner. We're not going to charge the small businesses for going on the site. But what we want to do is take away from any corporation or anybody saying, the old saying, I wish I could find a qualified minority, or I wish I could find a qualified company. We want to say, you go to this site and we're going to charge the company something like $30,000, $40,000 to be on the site. 50. All right, we're going to charge them $50,000 to go on the site. Whatever it is, but the idea is if we can aggregate African Americans who are talented and who are looking to be exposed to opportunity, because the technology site will be sophisticated enough that a company could say, I'm looking for Howard University, let's say Malcolm X College graduates that live within 30 miles of my plant. It'll spit out only those. You say, I want electrical engineers from the University of Illinois who live within 20 miles of Chicago. It'll spit out electrical engineers. If you want to improve your resume, it'll do that. If you want to do a video image of yourself because you better sell yourself, you can link all of that in. Companies will be able to do it. And companies will be able to go on, put their profile on, and we will add to that over time something like, you've heard of this thing called Angie's List, where people say nice things if you're a great small business and you get that reference and add on. Same thing here. We can add that kind of endorsement done by, not by us, but by the companies that they interact with. So the whole idea here is to sort of like use whatever technology is available to create an economic opportunity for African Americans and put subtle pressure on companies to no longer say, I can't find a talented African American lawyer, or I can't find a talented African American CFO, or a talented African American minority contractor to provide A, B, or C.
I absolutely think that's absolutely needed, because we've all heard that.
Oh yeah,
we've all heard that. Question: here you are as an African American man. You've got this financial company, and I'm wondering, why hasn't more been done amongst black financial companies and sort of the black investment community to really create access to capital for black entrepreneurs?
I think the fundamental reason it's not done is because it's the nature of capitalism. Capitalism, in its truest sense, tends to invest where the highest and best return is. It's, for all practical purposes, colorblind, and it perhaps should be. But the other is, which is probably the real reason, is there's a mindset in the broader population that African Americans do not know how to create value. They do not know how to create wealth. And so there's a tendency to think of African Americans as employees and recipients of wealth for social programs, Urban League, NAACP, but not as individuals who could come in and say, let me take $50 million and turn it into $100 million. And we've got to change that attitude because, unfortunately, you talk to most investors, when they think of African Americans who want to do business, they think it's a charitable call. We even get this today. When we were doing Ops Place, we were saying, hey, we want to start a business with you. We'd get the secretary or the CEO. She said, oh, we just gave to the Urban League. We bought a table. Anytime and when African Americans contact with white businesses, it's almost an assumption you're looking for a handout. You're looking for a social benefit. You're not coming to me with a deal where you can make money and I can make money. So it's a mindset that we have to change that theory. And even when you go to state pension funds, and we have a private equity fund where you raise money, and there's this crazy catch-22. You go to, and this is one that kills me, you go to Illinois State teachers, or you go to Chicago teachers, and you're an African-American son or daughter of a teacher who went to Harvard, went to Wharton, went to Michigan, wherever you went, and you graduated, and now you want to come back and manage mom and dad's money. Because they're the teachers, they're the firemen, they're the police. It's their pension. And the pension fund people say, we don't give money to first-time funds. Well, if you're a first-time fund and you can't get money to be a second-time fund, how are you ever going to get any money? And it's that kind of catch-22 that says the teacher can work all of her life teaching, send their kid off to Harvard to get an MBA, or Wharton to get an MBA, or Chicago to get an MBA, to come back now and say, hey, I got smart at that school. I want to run mom and dad's money. I'm sorry, you don't know how to do it. You're a first-time fund. And that cycle goes on and on and on. So when minority businesses come to the table and they're looking for money, and people say, in the back of their mind, and even this affects African Americans, the back of their mind, this is a scam. They don't know what they're doing. It's almost a self-rejection that, no. Or if I go to my boss with this, they're going to say, wait, you're just investing our money with African Americans. We want you to invest your money to make money. And i.e., implied behind that is invest with white people. And that's part of the problem. We've got to get over this mindset that only white Americans can create wealth.
Right. How do we help each other? I think that's what we're looking for is, how do we help each other create wealth?
Well, the one thing I think we have to do is we've got to get smart about consumption. We have got to start saving. When I went to graduate school at Princeton, and I took one course in economics, and there's one term that I learned. It's called, and you guys should remember this one, it's called the marginal propensity to consume. The marginal propensity to consume is that you consume way beyond your margin of wealth. And you know what they call that? Debt.
Yeah.
We have more debt than any other group in America, ergo, we have less savings. Without savings, you can't invest. Without investments, you can't accumulate wealth. We have got to postpone sort of what I call just unnecessary, impulsive consumption and focus on savings. And until we get to that point, we're not going to have enough wealth to invest. If you look at the statistics, African Americans have a median net worth of about $6,000.
Right.
White Americans have a net worth 18 times that. Today, Hispanics have surpassed us in median net worth. The Pew Research study pointed out that almost 50% of African Americans whose parents 25 years ago were solidly middle class will not attain the wealth of their parents. So when you look at that, that's a rollback. And
But why is that? We know we've been economically challenged. I mean, the whole country has, the whole world has. How did this hit us so hard? And how did we fall back so far?
the principal reason we fell far behind in terms of the role of government was our inability to acquire home ownership during the period when home ownership was the largest wealth generator for everybody in the society. We lagged behind in home ownership because we either didn't have the capital up front or the banks or the lenders, the mortgage lenders, wouldn't lend to us. And then when you add that the value of our properties did not grow at the level that the other population's values grew, so we did not have the accumulated wealth to pass on to our heirs in an estate. And so there was a huge, huge transfer of wealth by the federal government to a particular subset of this population. That was white Americans who could afford a down payment to buy a home. And that transfer is, in essence, the foundation of the wealth gap. Now, you can add to that educational gap. Mm-hmm. You can add to that other kinds of social policies, discrimination in lending, plain old racism. You can add all of those factors to the table. And what we have not done, and this is where it really gets kind of dicey, many of the causes for us being behind, they have nothing to do with our ingenuity. They have nothing to do with our creativity. We're some of the most creative people in the world. They have nothing to do with our work ethic and our drive. They have nothing to do with the ambition for ourselves and our children. Absolutely nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with our commitment and belief that this is a great country and we can benefit from it. It has to do that we were discriminated against in terms of access to capital and education. That created a gap in access to wealth. And that was caused by race-based actions. Mm-hmm. My theory is you cannot change that gap, close that gap, without race-based remedies. Now, that's politically, believe me, a powder keg to say that. It is not acceptable to the normal lexicon. It's not in the narrative today. But my theory is very simple. If somebody is running at 5 miles and you're running at 5 miles and they are 20 miles ahead of you, you will never catch them. And if you are running at 2 and they're running at 5, you're going to fall behind. So when you look at the world going forward, we're no longer a nation between two oceans. We are a nation in a globe. To me, if you were to look at corporate America, if the government, the powers that be in government, would go to corporate America and say, look, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars with you on infrastructure. Before you hire subcontractors, you must, or should, interview at least 2 minority subcontractors. We know you're going to be, we know you're going to be.
And it sounds great, and I agree with that 100%. It's not always the easiest thing to do when you're in that position.
No,
but
it's called leadership.
Absolutely.
You can do that. You can do that by going to people and saying, look, this is what we want you to do. I mean, if you talk about egos, forget the Congress. Think of 30 NFL team owners. You're going to put Jerry Jones and Dan Snyder and, all in a room and make them do something? That's leadership. That's having people, convincing people it's in their best interest.
Bravery.
And I think that's the one thing that government can do, because the laws of the land are such that you cannot have race-based remedies unless you can show a compelling national interest.
Live with Desiree Rogers. So what did you think? How did it turn out?
It was unbelievable. I mean, to see Linda, our chairwoman, and to see Bob speak in such an intimate way, I think everyone was there, couldn't help but be moved and excited about not just what Bob had to say, but, you know, their own futures. And so I think that we need to pay attention.
You know, these people are philanthropists. These people have given back at the highest level of give back for our community. When you think about the man who founded BET, Johnson Publishing Company, Ariel Investments, #1 mutual fund in the country, all representing our people. And they came out here today only because we asked. It's incredible.